Hey friends, welcome to a new day. This is Zen, and thank you for joining me once again on my journey coming back from fear. Today's episode is episode number 3, Trigger More Than a Horse. So far, we've talked about where the emotional monsters come from and what fear does to our mind and our body. In this episode, we will chat about how we can begin to reprogram our fight or flight triggers and increase our ability to feel uncomfortable without sounding those alarms. I don't know if you've ever watched the old episodes on TV, the TV version of Star Trek. And you know that if someone joined them in orbit, if they raised their shields on the Enterprise, the other aliens would also raise their shields. And it would not end well for anyone. That sound of the red alert spelled trouble, as things tended to get out of hand with everyone's emotional reactions. Working in a call center for a few decades, a common occurrence for me has been like receiving a call from someone who has just had a bad situation happen to them, either financially or in an accident or in a difficult situation. And it was clear to someone coming in fresh to their circumstances, looking from the outside in, that their fear had been triggered and that they were having trouble thinking clearly or were in attack mode. It was also the case that when an individual would raise their voice and start grilling me with questions or insulting my company I worked for or insulting me personally, that my fight or flight would kick in because in the eyes of my fear ego, I was being attacked by a giant saber-toothed tiger. And then after the call would end and, I'm back in my own zone, I would feel my heart racing and my adrenaline flowing and I realized, yep, I had been in fight or flight mode. And what's curious is after reassessing the situation, after I had also calmed down, it was interesting that I saw things on their, insurance policy that I didn't notice before. Because when we're in that fear mode, we're not really thinking clearly. The blood rushes from the non-muscle parts of our body to the muscles, in our arms, our legs, and the rest of our body to prepare to run or fight. And that leaves the brain suppressed to a reactionary primal instinct mode and not a logical, evaluative mode. We just want to fight or we want to run to end that situation. And our minds are not functioning at their top game during that process, of course. I think starting in a few episodes from now, we'll start going, through situations. We'll start breaking down specific types of fear-filled situations and practice getting to the root of them. In the self-searching of my own fears, I have usually gotten down to the root of that I care what people think, or what I think they would think, or what our supreme being would think. And in either of those cases, I feared rejection. The only other thing I found was the fear of a painful death because I didn't want to suffer. Though I have also discovered that, quote, suffering is also a choice. We will all feel pain, but suffering is optional. And I'll say that again because it was a big aha for me in my life. We will all feel pain, either emotional or physical, but suffering is optional. Suffering is the choice. And really every moment is a choice. Our actions may not feel like a choice because our decision-making process has become so quick based on our previous conditioning. But if we were able to push pause on our life, rewind, and kind of go forward frame by frame by frame, we could locate the nanosecond that a choice had been made. And we can go through a process of changing something from a habitual, reactive choice to become a conscious, responsive choice. One is out of control and detached from the logical mind, and the other has a close partnership between the logical part of our brain and the fear ego. So they work together. And we can begin by becoming aware that we made a choice months or years after the action. Eventually, we can move to noticing our choice right after we had made it and reacted on it or reacted to it. And then we can step into noticing it while it is still triggering in us and we're still reacting to it and still acting on it. We can eventually move into a place where we realize the feelings as we are reacting to it, and actually take the exit ramp off the freeway of insanity while it's happening. We don't have to go to the conclusion like we normally do. We can just kind of opt out and kind of stop in the middle of it all happening. And we might still react from time to time, but we can get to a place where our norm in that situation is that we stop before we react while still feeling the emotions, to the point where one day the situation no longer triggers us in a way that is noticeable to us. So it is all a process. It's not something that normally happens overnight, and we can forgive ourselves as we're going through it and not feel guilty, that we're experiencing life and that we're reacting to our conditioning. This process can be sped up if we find ways of interrupting our fight or flight alarm mode while it is happening. And there are ways that we can distract ourselves back to calmness. Having reminders that make motion or noise have been a great help for me. I have at times placed a large metal pendant on my medicine cabinet mirror, so when I open it in the morning, it clangs and gets my attention. Its purpose, of course, to remind me to come back to this moment and not race ahead into the day, concerned with what would or could or should happen. I also placed some chimey item around my rear view mirror in my car that helped me come back to the moment instead of racing to be somewhere or be concerned with traffic or what was going on around me. So that helped calm me. And at work, when I worked in a call center and worked in a place where I was surrounded by people all the time and constant activity, I placed my cell phone on vibrate with a recurring alarm that would go off every hour or so. Even added reminders to my online work calendar that would pop up throughout the day on my computer screen. And I named the alarm, I just said, breathe, because that would remind me, take some deep breaths and calm myself down, bring me back to this moment instead of getting caught up in the whirlwind of the work environment. There's always action, action, action. As I mentioned in the last episode, deep breathing is such an important part of coming out of the fear frenzy. We can force ourselves to calm down through various breathing techniques. And just as a reminder, it's as simple as, taking deep breath in through the nose, 3 seconds, holding it for 3 seconds, and then exhaling through the mouth 3 seconds. And you can extend the amount of time that you're breathing in, holding it, and expanding it. And the longer you do that, it just brings you to a place of calmness. Meditating and focusing on unconditional love as many times throughout the day as possible is also a great step to retrain the mind to stay out of the fear realm, no matter what is going on around us. So we make that our habit and our norm, and our little alarm system tends to not trip so easily if we're constantly bringing down like our stress level throughout the day. Deep diving into our beliefs about ourselves, about people, about situations, and really our beliefs about life allows us to question the conditions of fear that we have adapted to throughout our life. It's then that we also begin to wake up to realize that one of the main reasons we came here to Earth was to experience all these deep, uncomfortable emotions. And while we're going through it, it doesn't feel like we would want to have asked for it. But eventually, we begin to see things as they truly are. We get to see why we wanted to experience that. Sometimes it can feel like we're traveling through Poop Valley. It can seem pretty stinky when we are up to our nose in poop. And it can be a slippery slope as we descend into and try to climb out of that valley. But we learn not to yell with our mouths open wide as we fall face down into the poop. And that lesson we tend to learn the hard way. When we eventually get to the other side of Poop Valley, and we're all washed off and smelling like pretty flowers, we reflect upon the journey, and then we are thankful for the experience, but seldom while we are still face down in the poop. And I would think that if we had reminders of what it will be like after we've gone through the experience, that could allow us to make choices along the way, to not complain so much, not get so angry, and maybe not feel so helpless. We might even leave our victimhood behind after we've experienced what we want to experience in that poop canyon, or we might not. We might want to hold on to that victimhood for a while. And either is okay. No time is ever wasted. No moment is a mistake. And that is something that was another life-changing thing for me, is no moment is a mistake. We came here to experience, and by golly, experience we will. It is interesting that our society has become less tolerant of situations because of technology and, the ability to have credit. We've become accustomed to not wanting for much, not having to wait to obtain what we want, having everything now, even if it means getting into debt and paying 3 times as much for it due to interest. We don't have to wait for dinner to be ready anymore because we can nuke something and be eating it in minutes instead of having to wait, for when's, dinner going to be ready, Mom? And in an hour, it's like, oh my God, I'm going to die. But it did teach us to be more tolerable of waiting, but not today. We don't have to wait for letters to arrive through the mail or wait until after work to go talk to a friend or make plans, because we have immediate connection and continual connection through phones, email, social media, and all that. We can download music, TV shows, online books, movies, without having to even go to, like the store when they're released. We can have them seconds after they're released and be watching them right away. So again, we don't have to wait. The lists of things we should have grown quite long as well, including cable, internet, the newest phone, things we think we can't live without. But imagine this. Within the last 50 years, people used to be able to survive just off of water, food, shelter, and companionship. Whoa, dude. Isn't that crazy? But there does seem to be something churning within our society here. Maybe it's because times are getting tougher for the bottom 99%. But we seem to be evaluating what we really need and are simplifying our lives, or returning to what we feel is most important. There is a movement starting with people downsizing and seeking like tiny homes or smaller homes, preferring to spend more time enjoying life than working endlessly and not being able to enjoy what they are paying for. And it can be quite revealing when you look at how much something costs and, take it down to like an hourly rate. So you look at how much you make an hour, how much that costs, and how many hours you would have to work to pay for that new item. And the desire for that item can quickly fade. Because you're like, what? I have to work 8 hours for that? I don't think so. And we can change our lives if we begin to look at what we want and why we want it. And to be able to think clearly about all of this, we'll need to walk gently along the line of our fear alarms. We can daily question ourselves, what am I fearing? We can daily remind ourselves to breathe. And we can help each other remember when we notice each other in fight or flight mode. It's like, hey, dude, kind of freaking out. And I'm beginning to post some daily reminders of these things on my Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram accounts. So if you want those reminders, just check out the links I provided below in the description of this podcast. So distracting ourselves out of the freaking out mode is really the first step. Gaining control over our emotions is part of this. And as we discover our power of choice through the process, at first we are afraid, to admit that we are the only ones that have control over our own emotions. Our fear ego really wants someone to blame, because if we alone are responsible for our own feelings, then we are the ones to blame for our unhappy, imperfect life that the fear ego thinks we are supposed to have. When we are patient with ourselves, we can move past this mentality and realize, number one, we didn't come here to have a perfect life. Number two, there are no rules except those forced upon us by others. And then number three, because of that, our life is perfect just the way it is. And you'll probably get tired of me saying this until it clicks inside your head. We came here to experience all these uncomfortable emotions. And so no matter what is happening, we are experiencing, and that is exactly what we came here to do. Perfect. And when we move past our victimhood mentality, we realize number four, we are powerful, supernatural beings made of unconditional love, making choices every second of either unconditional love or the fear of losing conditional love. When we get our power back, we fear less and we trigger less. And as we trigger less, we have more calm time in our lives to look at the conditional love laws within our minds that spawn the fear in our lives. When we begin to be able to be calm and come back to the place of clear thinking, we can dive into our fears to understand them, to question them. In our next episode, we will chat about how we can deep dive into ourselves. Until then, snap out of it. Put some daily reminders in your path to breathe. Come back to peace and ask yourself, what am I fearing? Every moment is of unconditional love or the fear of losing conditional love. Remember who you are.